Hello and welcome to Uncensored Conservatism. This is episode 354. Today we're going to talk a little bit about abortion. Okay, so this is part of a series that I call Things That Made Me Go, huh? And this one is, given the availability of contraception in the United States, why are there so many abortions? According to one estimate, there's like over 1,038,000 abortions in 2024. You look at the average cost of an abortion. Abortion pills without insurance cost about $690. A medical surgical abortion in the first trimester is about $700. So they're about equal. And in the second trimester, a surgical abortion is $1,750 on average, out of pocket, without insurance. Um, Now, most of them, they say, are uh, what they call the medical abortions, the non-surgical ones. There's a couple of pills that the woman takes, and the first one kills the fertilized egg, and the second pill expels the remains. Um, Now, when you take a look at contraception, there's several forms. Female sterilization, which is basically tubal ligation. There's the birth control pill. Male condoms are still rather cheap. Intrauterine devices, what they call LARC, LARC, or long-lasting reversible contraception, which are basically implants which release some hormones that prevent fertilization or implantation. Um, and then we know that there's 72.7 million women of childbearing age, that's age 15 to 49, I believe, and that 65% of them use some form of contraception, which leads you to question why don't the other 35? Well, it could be because they just want to have babies, or maybe it's too expensive for them, or varying reasons. They're just lazy, in my opinion. Um, so, given the availability of contraception, I don't understand why there's so many abortions in the country. Take the example of Planned Parenthood. They're a number one provider of abortion. They should be handing out birth control pills with the money that they rake in. Um, and then there's the business model also, the cost of contraceptions versus the cost of abortion. So, I believe it's from either Forbes or The Economist or some other outlet, the contraception is an $8.76 billion industry in the United States, while the abortion industry is a $4.3 billion industry. So the contraception industry is actually larger than the abortion industry. So the abortionists should be maybe using a better business model and doing more contraception. This leads me to a little another question I have about the left when it comes to abortion. Um, Now, they seem to be opposed to the concept of informed consent when it comes to abortion, and I gotta wonder why, um, as compared to other medical procedures or even the prescription drugs that are handed out. And the two areas where this comes in is with ultrasounds and waiting periods. Now, Guttmacher Institute is one of the biggest pro-abortion outlets out there. Um, you know, uh, they are constantly out there about reproductive health, reproductive rights, which is really stupid because assumes reproducing something. Reproductive health I would assume, a common sense definition of the word or the phrase would be reproducing something, not killing something. So, unless it's an emergency or something like that, and even conservatives have those big three where, when it comes to abortion, which are rape, incest, and threat to maternal life, their physical health. Of course, the left has expanded that out to their mental health also. They may not mentally or financially be able to bear a child and raise that child, so therefore that child should be killed in the womb. But anyway, Guttmacher says, most importantly, they said that by the time a woman goes to an abortion clinic, that they've already made up their mind. They're going to have that abortion. And they say that, for instance, ultrasounds are medically unnecessary. Well, okay. Well, if they already made up their mind, then what difference does it make if they get an ultrasound? And to say it's medically unnecessary is kind of not true. Um, an ultrasound will determine gestational age, and doctors need to know gestational age when they perform the abortion. For instance, for certain states disallow uh, abortions after the first trimester, after the first 3 months of pregnancy. So they need to determine what the actual age of that baby is. They can't rely on a woman's uh, self report when they walk into a clinic. This establishes gestational age. So, and if they've already made up their mind, what difference does it make? It's not like they're showing here, look, this is what you're killing, and show a picture of an ultrasound to the woman. This is what you're killing in your womb. Therefore, think about this. And which brings me to this next thing, which is that the waiting periods. Now, some states have 24, 48, 72-hour waiting periods in between initial consultation and actually receiving the abortion. And once again, the Guttmacher, and I'm going to quote them, so bear with me. They say, quote, waiting periods for abortion are medically unnecessary. They are required for almost no other medical procedure, and they do not make abortion care safer. Instead, they aim to deter people from getting an abortion or to compel them to reconsider a decision that the vast majority, and they have a link to that study, are already certain of by the time they contact a clinic. Again, what difference would it make if they have to wait 24, 48, or 72 hours? And let's just take this apart. Waiting periods for abortion are medically unnecessary. Debatable. Let's give them that one just for the sake of argument. But then they go on. They are required for almost no other medical procedure. Absolute bullshit. Unless it's an emergency. And according to them, apparently every abortion is an emergency. Every surgical procedure requires a waiting period. As a personal example, I had this fatty tumor on my stomach and I wanted to get rid of it. And I went to the doctor and I, expected him to take it out in the office right then and there. And he says, oh, no, 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 we got to go into surgery and, you got to take these tests and about anesthesia. I ended up getting general anesthesia, was awake for the whole thing. Listen to the whole conversation between the nurses and the doctor, the surgeon, as this fatty tumor was removed from my abdomen. But I was expecting it to be done that day, but it wasn't done that day. In fact, it was like 14 days later. So there was a waiting period for a surgical procedure. You go to to a dentist, and they're gonna, well, you got a cavity here, there, and I'm gonna schedule you for oral surgery or whatever. And again, unless it's an emergency, I'm going to schedule you for some fillings. We'll do this side on one day and this side on the other day or whatever in about a week or so. So there is a waiting period. Even for dental appointments or any elective surgery, there's always, even you go in and you say, I have cancer. Yes, you have skin cancer or whatever. And the doctor says, yes, I have skin cancer. He doesn't send you right over to the chemotherapy place and they start zapping you or anything like that. Oh, here's some drugs. Take these drugs. It's not the way it's done in the medical industry, including abortion. There needs to be a waiting period. So I call bullshit on Guttmacher on that one because obviously there are waiting periods for many medical procedures. And then they go on and they say that, and they do not make abortion care any safer. Well, again, that's debatable. They said they aim to deter people from getting an abortion or compel them to reconsider a decision. First of all, that's their opinion. We don't know that they aim to deter people from getting an abortion. We don't know. That's Guttmacher's opinion, or to compel them to reconsider a decision. Well, if they already made up their mind and you have a study linked to this paragraph on your website, then if they've already made up their mind, then there's no reconsideration in 24, 42, 72 hours, or even if it's a fucking week. So that's that I call bullshit on that. This is all part of informed consent. Before you have surgery, you have to sign a shitload of forms. And they tell you, even with prescriptions, before writing a prescription, they tell you the complications. They do tests on you as to whether they're, will have an interaction with any other drug or whatever. So I call bullshit on that. The other thing is the left's opposition to crisis pregnancy centers. Now, these are, you know, uh, centers that have sprung up around the country where they're an option to abortion. And the left is really, really against them. Um, and they provide pregnancy testing, counseling, medical services throughout your pregnancy, some postpartum care. They have some material assistance. They don't give you money, but they'll give you formula and diapers and stuff like that to get you started on your way after you have the baby. And they also provide counseling. Now, ironically, some pregnancy crisis centers do, in fact, my cat is biting my leg, is they do say, here's what we can offer, here's what we'll do for you, we'll be there for the next 9 months, whether you're, single or not, or whatever. We're going to help you out afterwards. And if, make up your mind, and if you don't want to do that, there's an abortion clinic. You can always have an abortion. But on the other side, the abortion people say, it's sort of like, okay, no waiting periods, no ultrasound, no this, no that. Hop up on that table, spread your legs, and I'll put a vacuum up your vagina and suck out the sucker. Um, in the case of surgical abortions, and in the case of the medical abortions, it's like, okay, well, here, I'm going to give you this prescriptions and go out and, or maybe I have a sample in the back here, take care of it. Um, but they don't say, hey, listen, there's a crisis pregnancy center down the street. Maybe you should go talk to that. Maybe go talk to them also. And then if you're still make up your mind, you want to have an abortion after the waiting period, come on back and we will gladly do it. And I don't think anybody would have a problem with that in a way, unless, assuming that these people have already made up their minds. And they say they do. And then they complain about that there's, and this is a fact. These crisis pregnancy centers, they have 3 times the number of pregnancy centers in the country than there are abortion providers. Okay, so what? And then crisis pregnancy centers take in $1.2 billion a year. Oh my God. The abortion clinics, with less of them, take in $4.8 billion a year. So what the fuck are they complaining about? What it boils down to is a lot of these places are faith-based, and that's what they object to. Okay, that's all. That's all it is. And failing that argument to say, oh, they prey on poor minorities. What the hell does an abortion? What Planned Parenthood? What the hell do they do? They prey on minorities. There's a reason. It's not because of they're in an urban center, which happen to be largely minority. It's because they like to kill black babies. I hate to say that, but they like to kill black babies. And the statistics will come out, oh, more white women of childbearing age and all that kind of stuff. But Planned Parenthood clinics are located in a particular place for a particular reason. Okay? And nobody says anything about that, but that technically it's genocide, in my opinion. And then there's the complications from the abortion pills themselves. I'm going to take the case of Amber Thurman down there in Georgia. Georgia passed a fetal heartbeat law. She thought she was in violation of it, so she went to North Carolina. A doctor in North Carolina prescribed the 2 pills to her. Well, they didn't work out exactly the way everybody says they do. We're assured by the abortion industry that these pills are 99% safe and effective. FDA goes along with it. You can even get them mail order now, I believe, a teleconference or something, medical teleconference at this point. Some states have cracked down on that. But anyway, well, she goes back to Georgia, and guess what? It didn't act the way it was supposed to. The fetal remains were not expelled, and she developed blood poisoning or sepsis, and she died as a result of it. Now, part of that is that's after she went to an emergency room. Now, part of that is, I do believe, malpractice on the part of those doctors in the emergency room. And I say that only because there is a law called EMTLA, EMTLA. It's about emergency medical care. And they are provide. It doesn't matter whether she had an abortion, whether she stuck a hanger up her yazoo and did it herself, or whether she went to North Carolina. If she goes into an emergency room, they are supposed to deal with that. Not think, oh, we're against this may go against the Georgia law, because first of all, the pills were prescribed in North Carolina. She's a Georgia resident, but the pills were prescribed in North Carolina legally under their law. So they should have taken care of her, and that's medical malpractice. I think there was another case in Texas about some girl who had technically a miscarriage, not from the drugs or anything like that, and care was denied because they thought she had an abortion. They didn't want to take care of her, and again, that's wrong on the part of the hospital, on the part of the doctors there. So, but anyway, let's get. There's another thing. I have a friend. She's very liberal. She has the gay pride, the Ukraine flag emojis on her social media postings and stuff like that. Um, I'm still friends with her, very good friends with her. I don't talk politics with her anymore. We were discussing gun control at one time, and I knew I'm not going to change her mind on that. But it just showed that she didn't know what she was talking about, because when we were talking about gun control, she says, "No, it's right there in the name." I go, "What's in the name?" And she goes, "Assault rifle, AR-15. It's an assault rifle." I go, AR does not stand for assault rifle. And after that, I just never talked politics with her. But anyway, she once asked me, she goes, "Well, you're Catholic." And I'm like, "Okay, I am." And she says, and you're pro-life," which I am unabashedly pro-life. And she says, "So how can you be against abortion but for capital punishment?" Okay, well, first of all, I don't take my thoughts from the Pope or from. I base my view on abortion on biology, a science. Well, I was told to follow the science, so I follow the science. I didn't follow religion. I follow the science on that one. And I said, hey, here's a human life. I'm sorry. For all intents and purposes, at the point of fertilization, it's a human life. You exchange DNA, it makes something unique. Leave it alone. It's not going to develop into a frog or a fish or a tree or anything like that. Leave it alone. Everything goes okay. It's going to become a baby. You're going to reproduce. We should, when we're talking about reproductive health, we should be concerned about the health of what is reproduced. But she couldn't understand, the second part of this is that abortion is taking an innocent life. But they view it as a blob of cells, and maybe it is up until a certain point. I'm iffy on that one. I'm going to say at fertilization, it is human life, and it should be protected. And in the case of capital punishment, these are people who have been found guilty by a panel of peers from their community who have been found guilty. Now, that being said, there are some people who have been found guilty who have later been exonerated by DNA evidence or another person coming forward or so on and so forth. Now, first of all, we only mete out executions for people who murder other people. We don't do it for rapists, who I think are maybe lower than a murderer. I just find rape to be disgusting. And, as I think Kurt Cobain of Nirvana said it, a waste of human sperm. Um, but anyway, we don't execute murderers. I mean, we do execute murderers. We don't execute rapists. But in the case of those who commit homicide, of the obviously guilty, then they should be executed, and I have no problem with that. And I look at it as cost benefit type of thing. It costs up to $70,000 a year per inmate on death row, and there's like over almost 2,100 of them. So that's $136 million a year. Now, they're on death row for an average of 22 years. Some people 30, 40 years. Uh, they usually die a natural death um, if they're not executed before that. And that's $2.9 billion over the lifespan on average of a death row inmate spread across several states, of course. But that's $2.9 billion that could be used toward infrastructure improvements, or hey, you're California, go build some new abortion clinics and catch up with those pregnancy crisis centers, or whatever. So it's obviously it's the guilty. There is one case I need to mention here, and it's the Glossop case out of Oklahoma, where some guy was bludgeoned to death with a baseball bat or something in a motel room, and apparently, according to the story, the manager of the motel told this other guy to bludgeon the guy to death and paid him $50,000. Now, through a plea bargain, the guy who actually took the baseball bat to somebody else's head got life in prison, and the guy who allegedly paid the $50,000 got the death penalty. And it's been before the Supreme Court 2 or 3 times now, and I think they just turned it back to Oklahoma and says, will you retry this motherfucker already and get this out of our hair and let the chips fall where they may. Oklahoma's being dicks about it for some reason. Here's a case where a guy's on death row and is questionable, and the person who should be on death row gets life in prison. So that's wrong. But in the obvious cases, like Jeffrey Dahmer was caught with his hands in the cookie jar. I mean, so we're going to keep him alive, not give him the death penalty? That little puke down in South Carolina, Dylan Roof, who shot up the black church and at a Bible study, he deserves the death penalty. We don't plea bargain with the obviously guilty. You get the bad eggs out of society, and that's how you do it. You don't get the good eggs out of society. And by the good eggs, I mean the fertilized egg of a woman, because that fertilized egg is going to become a human life. It will be a human life. So I'm get a little tired of it, because abortion, when you break down the statistics of why women get abortions, I think it's less than 1% are for rape or incest, and maybe 2%, 2 to 3% for threat to maternal life. And I'm talking about their physical life. You have the baby, you have a chance of dying in birth. So let's just give them 4%. That means 96% of abortions in America, 80,000 of them are for convenience. Simple, plain and simple. It's going to interfere with my education. I'm not ready for a baby. I can't afford a baby at this time. Well, again, let's go back to, well, maybe you should have considered contraception. And I'm not talking about morning after pills, because using them as contraception puts a serious strain on your uterus, honey. So if you ever want a kid later in life, you ever get your shit together, you graduate college, you find a job, maybe get a husband, or a willing partner in child rearing. Even if you don't want to get married, maybe you've got your shit together in life, then you wouldn't need that morning after pill to expel a possible human life. Now, I do have originally I was going to say that, the use of contraception is based upon intent not to get pregnant, but taking the morning after pill, which is actually an abortifacient, not a form of contraception. When I'm talking contraception, I'm talking about those things I talked about before. The pill, condoms, tubal ligation, stuff you do before you fuck. Okay, that's what contraception is. It's stuff you do before you have sex to prevent becoming pregnant. Not having sex and then taking something. That is not contraception. Okay? Now, it's nice that they have those pills out there just in case. I hear they're putting them in vending machines in colleges now, which is kind of weird. But anyway, those are thoughts on abortion and things that make me say, huh. I'll be back next Monday, I believe, or Tuesday, whatever, sometime next week, because I'm going to be doing my usual slide thingy. So join me then. Well, I think I'm going to take on things that make me say, huh, about transgenders and transgenderism, or I like to call it transgender mania. And yes, that is a Pink Floyd shirt on there. Love Pink, love me Pink Floyd. Hate Roger Waters, but love me Pink Floyd. Anyway, that's it for today. Have a great day and more pleasant tomorrow.